right? Yeah, I think pushing the free line is kind of a good phrase. You try to offer as much value as you can up front for free, and then that makes people want to do business with you later because you wonder what else you have if you're giving all this great stuff away for free.
Right. And from my standpoint, my value system is that everybody has just as much right to the information as I do that I have, and so that's why if you come from that state of mind, then people will share the information with you that you need, right? And people will support you. All of us are kind of a reflection. The people around you are always a reflection of the way you treat yourself. Um, and if you really give value to yourself and you reflect that on other people, that there really isn't anything that you can't overcome. It doesn't matter what the market conditions do or what is happening out there. Just make sure you're giving value to the people around you, right?
Yeah, and then you save so much time, I guess, on trying to figure out what to charge for your services and what to include and not include, and
And you will get provided for. The universe will provide. If you are providing for that, you will get provided. And things will just happen randomly. I'll be the first one to tell you things happen randomly. All of a sudden, boom! All of a sudden, something gets taken care of. Like, thank God, right? It's like, um, but it is a simple energetic circuit. As long as you're continuing to provide, you will be.
is that the same as an intentional community? Because I've been to one of those before. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. Um, Kind of, sort of just like just a Christian community that's kind of just self-sustaining and then connects with other communities that are similar or they trade products. Maybe they will sell products from another community that's, in the South or on the East Coast. Yeah. Very cool though. I mean, you're going to get better food from somebody that has their own cattle and milks their own cows and makes their own cheese and all that stuff. It's just like if they're not buying anything from the commercial market and they're making everything for themselves. I mean, use your imagination. The stuff that uh, I've had there, I mean, it tastes to me like the danishes they make are an old European like Danish recipe. That it's just like, man, it's like, yeah, huckleberry cheese stuffed danishes. It's like, man, it's like so good. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and joining me today for another episode of Define Your Purpose is Brian Curtis. Brian's out of Benton City, Washington.
The Mecca of the Northwest, yeah.
Right? I guess you're, according to your LinkedIn, you help executives and organizations restructure their their organization, and that reduces their stress and increases the creativity in the organization, I guess.
Yeah, everything starts on the inside. Uh, so, restructuring starts on the inside. Coaches and consultants will be the first one to tell you that their own process of helping other people has restructured them internally more than any external restructure will ever happen. That's why there's so many executive coaches out there because executives deal with, they ground out so much trauma in their environment, but unknowingly, many of those business structures actually create the trauma that is created in those systems. So I like to focus on both, and I think it's impossible to focus on one or the other, if that makes sense, because the way you structure yourself and the way that you see yourself will reflect on other people, and that has actually created the business structures that we see today. The business structures we see today are narcissistic in nature. They pull energy towards the center of those structures. And so anytime that you look at another person and you feel like you have more worth than someone else, it creates a structure that creates a value system that does that, which is why you've got positions in companies where you've got a lot of people making more money than other people. And it's actually created a lot of destruction, which is why you see the large exodus in the business community that you have. You end up with a bunch of individual contractors and entrepreneurs because they don't want to work for somebody else who's got more freedom than they do. Why do they deserve this more than I do? Right? I mean, it's a simple question. Um, and college, in a lot of ways, and this white collar mentality versus blue collar mentality has created those social cliques, and it is a false narrative in every sense of the word. The uh, college students and engineers will be the first ones to tell you once they get out of college and they go to work, that's when they begin to learn what they're actually going to do in their life. College really doesn't prepare you, for positions in business. And so the trend in business has been not to hire out of college, which has created the mental health crisis we see in colleges. So all these underlying social issues come from these deeper judgments of the self and how that gets projected on the people around us. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like a shared value problem almost that arises.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, basically learning how to learning more about yourself and how to give value to other people is what the coaching industry has created for itself, because coaches and consultants have known for a long time there isn't any individual who can't attain, a higher and higher level of self-worth, understanding that they can overcome pretty much anything and overcome any fear. There's no reason to be afraid of doing anything. And so they want to make sure their job is to empower people. Unfortunately, there's so many individual contractors now that it's creating that tension in the market. And so, I've created a weekly roundtable event to educate people on these underlying dynamics and how they affect each other, especially in the business world. When everybody's trying to advertise a service, if you have if that number keeps increasing, then it gets more and more difficult to sell a service because you have to keep putting more energy into that system to to keep it afloat. Yeah.
Right. Right. You have to be more and more qualified, I guess, to get the business out there.
Yeah, you're constantly in a state of trying to create more value for yourself to attract more potential clients. Not only that, but as the inflation rate rises, it gets harder and harder for the average consumer to afford a service that you might be providing. And businesses are having a tendency to retract assets, physical assets, to try to counteract these rising inflationary trends. Uh, but people are the resource. So if you're ever not treating the people around you as your resource and yourself as a resource, then you're actually enabling that trend unwillingly. And so, my job has been to try to educate people on that aspect and try and get businesses to see where there's a lot of talk around, that our employees are assets. But anytime you kind of define somebody as an employee that works for you, you're still kind of creating an unequal value system in a way. You're not saying, hey, look, you have just as much right to the incentive of what we're doing as a group. And this in this way, it can help open up that creative energy, which is being blocked in a lot of ways by creating a master slave relationship. Nobody wants to be in a master slave relationship with their relationships. Nobody. And that's why we become individual contractors.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think it's not that money is inherently evil. It's just a tool, but we end up getting kind of warped by the constant charging everything.
Yeah, I had this. I put a post earlier this week. I said, or last Friday, I did, just because I wanted to let people kind of run down a certain train of thought. So, what if you opened a coffee shop and you decided to work off donation? So every person coming through say, hey, we just take donations for coffee. What do you want? What would you like? There's about three different general classes of people that you would run into in that situation, right? In society, you'd run into the people that would give you more than that coffee was worth because they would be so thankful for the service. The people that tip all the time, and they have a lot of asset. Well, there's actually four classes there, and then there's the people that would try and figure out exactly how much that cup of coffee was worth and give you exactly what it's worth. And then there's people that would just take advantage of you. Oh, we got free coffee. It's donation, right? There's people that would just take advantage of that coffee. And then there's the people that actually would love, so appreciate a cup of coffee that don't have much to offer, but would probably offer to help you make the cup of coffee at the same time, right? Um, that dynamic, creating that dynamic and empowering the people that were working in the coffee stand to decide and cut people off who are trying to take advantage of them would create a scenario, a much healthier long-term relationship with potential clients, because now you're working with people and say, hey, look, this is, you get to know how much it's costing them to make the coffee. There's so much that goes on in society that we block energetically in our relationships by just charging a flat rate for a service, right? I mean, if I just charge you a flat rate to do something, it there's no relationship that gets created there. You don't, you interact all day long, and nothing really happens. So teaching people these underlying dynamics, and changing the way that we do business, because we're going to have to. There really isn't a choice. I mean, people might think that my content is educational at times, but there's underlying value. I don't think people realize that the road that we're heading down is going to force people, and it has forced people, especially marketers, to change their approach and the way that they're providing content to naturally attract people that need their service. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think pushing the free line is kind of a good phrase. You try to offer as much value as you can up front for free, and then that makes people want to do business with you later because you wonder what else you have if you're giving all this great stuff away for free.
Right. And from my standpoint, my value system is that everybody has just as much right to the information as I do that I have, and so that's why if you come from that state of mind, then people will share the information with you that you need, right? And people will support you. All of us are kind of a reflection. The people around you are always a reflection of the way you treat yourself. Um, and if you really give value to yourself and you reflect that on other people, then there really isn't anything that you can't overcome. It doesn't matter what the market conditions do or what is happening out there. Just make sure you're giving value to the people around you, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. I say I try to help everybody that I meet, and I think that kind of creates it's sort of a void, and the universe hates a void, fills a void back in. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of your readers or you guys, there's a larger and larger group of population that read tarot, right? Psychics online. And the tarot is a very old deck. I've researched the tarot for a while. It's one of the oldest practices known to man. The tarot deck, like the Rider Waite tarot deck, is a very old deck. They actually use images that were created by Catherine Brown, I believe is her name. I can't remember her name exactly, but it was somebody that divined images, and the images that you see on those cards indicate a lot of mental and emotional states that people go through. That, and it's just because this image popped into my mind when you said that. Like for example, the Four Pentacles shows a man just sitting in a chair with four pentacles around him. saying somebody that is kind of keeping things to himself and not really sure how to share what he has to offer the world. There's a lot of mental states around that, right? If you have a lot of intellectual knowledge and you're not providing it for the people around you, in some ways you're a little bit disconnected, right, from your environment, and you feel like maybe you're propping yourself up too much, like, oh, I have all this stuff and you guys are all on your own. Right. um, yeah, so that was just the image that popped into my head. I actually don't do tarot readings, or, and I put a lot of grain of salt in a lot of the readers out there, because I cite we you live in a unified field of intelligence, and we do pick up on each other's thoughts and emotions all day long. And so you do see, but you see readers that are connecting with people in a way that is energetically tied to the way they feel about themselves. It's really easy to see that when you see somebody projecting content on YouTube, or it doesn't matter where it's at, any kind of content. It I love to watch people, because everyone expresses the way that their internal state is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you get what you give, the old saying. So I wonder what is it like when you work with a customer? Then how do you do your billing and all that stuff? Given this,
Well, I literally work on donation. So if somebody feels like, because for one thing, I don't, it forces you to grow. It will force you to grow in ways you can't imagine. And so I can't teach internal development unless I force myself into a situation that forces me to grow continually. Because you won't get positive feedback from your environment if you're not providing for it. And so it pushes you into a situation where you're providing in a more profound way constantly. You're uh, and so not only that, but if somebody doesn't return, and likewise, it pushes them into a karmic cycle. They actually learn from just not providing for me, because my intent is to lift you up, to for us both to grow. And so if I can, tell somebody how they can support me if I'm supporting them. You know, you can, however you feel like you need to support me. It doesn't have to be monetarily, because for one thing, you want to be available to everyone. There's a lot of people that are in a place where, a lot of the people that need the most help have the least amount of money, right? So, and that's why I teach structure, because there is a way for people to structure their relationships so that they can co-create together, instead of falling into some kind of master slave relationship.
yeah, yeah, that's great. I love that. So what's in store for your business for this year? I mean, and how did you get started on doing this consulting in the first place?
That's a very good question.
I started asking one question, then I thought of the other questions.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can start back to, I worked for a public utility, and public entities. It doesn't matter what, I'm not going to bash any one in particular, because all publicly run companies, generally speaking, are fairly dysfunctional from the inside out. They work on this hierarchical model. And since they get a steady stream of income from the community for a service that they're providing, that the community really doesn't have an option of saying no to, then it kind of give them carte blanche to do whatever they want to internally, and they can waste a lot of money. Yeah, they can waste a lot of money doing things very inefficiently, and it doesn't have a negative impact on their long-term job, which is sad, because it ends up costing the community a lot more. And there's really no way. The only way to really regulate that, in a lot of ways, is through your local government. But generally speaking, that's not an easy thing to do. I think people universally agree that talking your local government into taking charge over a local public entity is, and restructuring it, very difficult thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess the same thing happens um, in groups of people too, and in families and
Yeah, it's all the same. And so to go back to your question, I left that business in end of 2021, so let's say 2.5 years ago, and it didn't have to do with, you know, I knew inherently that the people within that business were good people, and I enjoyed working with them. There were a lot of false idealisms within that business that have been created over time for so long that we believe in systems that we thought worked in the past, but then we don't see, even if we see how dysfunctional they are and how they're having a degrading effect on those relationships within the business. A lot of people just don't, it's very difficult to change that without the person changing themselves from the inside out, forcing themselves into a situation where they're in service to other people. And that's what altruistically serving people does, is it forces you to learn about yourself so much that you'll realize that, wow, your belief systems start to change in a lot of ways, um, and understanding and how you understand relationships, and how the purpose of relationships are to provide for each other. And then on the flip side, when I'm providing for someone else, and when they're looking at me, they see me as a support system for them because I'm providing them with something that they didn't have. And so, when you create systems that do that naturally, and that fundamental relationship doesn't break down, then those relationships have the potential to grow forever, right? Then you're never pulling energetically from each other. Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's important to make relationships a place that you go to give rather than a place you take from.
But if everybody's giving to each other, you naturally get what you need. I mean, you naturally attract because you're growing as a person. So um, I understood that structure wasn't supporting that. The way the structure was built. And so after I left, I created a decentralized decision making system so that any size group could make decisions as a group instead of having to rely on one person. Because generally speaking, that can cause a master slave relationship, right? If you are forced to take the decisions from somebody else and you don't have input, that in it, regardless of money, that creates a master slave relationship. Um, like if you're married and your wife never lets you make any decisions for the family, right? Eventually that relationship will get really, really toxic. If you're never making decisions together, then or vice versa, if you're making all the decisions for her and you don't give her any input, then that grows toxic. Relationships are all about being surrendering to the people around you, but at the same time surrendering to people that are surrendering to you as well.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that's good to keep that in mind. I think that both of those people get so locked into what they can see in front of them and what is there that I think it's always hard to imagine what could be. I think that's just kind of hard for human beings to imagine possibilities. Everybody seems to have a difficulty with that at some time or another.
All of us have difficulty with relationships for sure. And, I mean, all of us grew up in families that came from old, ways of doing things. And so there was always a lot of generational trauma from wars and things that people had to. I mean, we're not that many generations removed from the Civil War in the United States. When you look back, we're only 4 or 5 generations back there. And, my great grandparents were in Civil War. So, that's very few people that had to deal with fighting each other in the same country, you know? And so, a lot of that trauma is still being experienced elsewhere in the world, with the Russia Ukraine conflict. You might have families that are fighting each other because they're on the other side of a border. It's like, um, those things are, you know, energetically, it creates this pull and push scenario that has an effect on the entire world. There's no way that anybody can really isolate themselves from those things. They have an expanding effect. And so, in a lot of ways, there's a large percentage of the spiritual community that just concentrate on just grounding energy, meditation exercises, and making sure that you're not getting pulled into negative mindsets where you can't have a positive impact on your environment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to have happen. Transfers almost just like the positive does, I think.
And so the same can be said for me in the business community. You have to, as a and I see it across the board when I look at people and how they advertise. There's a grounding effect that happens weekly where people make sure that they're in the right place. They spend enough time in self care to make sure that they're grounding out all these negative energies of um, it is a form of competition when you're not co-creating. If I'm not in a relationship with you and we're just building something together, then if I'm trying to sell something, I'm technically in conflict with it in some way. Now, if I'm providing for it, there's no conflict. And if I'm naturally attracting, there's no conflict. But if I'm actively trying to sell something without providing something first, then you put yourself in conflict, which is why the selling model has started to fail because if the level of conflict is rising, there's just no way to do that anymore. People don't respond to just sales calls. Cold calls don't work anymore. Marketers will be the first ones to tell you that they don't work anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of coaches struggle with too. Is um, how long should my package be, and how much should it be, and how long should my program be, and I think that it's better to be the trusted advisor almost indefinitely because you can't fit life into 12-week sprints, and then people they want to get through the 12 weeks, or they end up feeling like they didn't get everything from it, or um, it sets up all these expectations, I think, too, and the expectation of customer is very different from the expectation of client. A client is in your care, whereas a customer just purchases a service or a thing from you.
Yeah, client, you have a, everybody should look at if you have a client or somebody that you're helping with something, um, regardless of the monetary relationship, that's immaterial to the fact that you're trying to give them, a lot of innate value to create. For one, you're creating a mindset more than anything. Um, I'll be the first one to tell you that I don't involve myself in coaching just because I know that it has more to do with mastering the self, for as how well somebody can do something. And so, like right now, I published a first book, but I'm writing a second book that's actually a guide to that effect because to show people what happens when you put yourself in service to the people around you altruistically, it actually raises your sense of awareness uh, exponentially, continually. It never stops. There's a lot of meditation techniques that raise awareness. But as soon as you sell that, you just stop the process because now you're selling it at that level. And now you're providing that for a lot of people at the level that you attained. If you ever, if you just provide it altruistically and just naturally attract what you need, it never stops because you have to keep providing it. What it does is it forces healing into your environment, which forces you to ground more energy. You eventually become a master healer because you're transmuting so much negative energy that you start to heal yourself from the inside out. I mean, it really is a something that I believe that Jesus and other ascended masters and a lot of old spiritual texts actually taught that isn't readily being taught now, in the world today, um, because of we live in a world that lives on money, right? And knowing what I know now, I know exactly why Jesus went to the temple and started smashing all these people selling spirituality in the temple. Because yeah, you can't sell somebody a connection to their higher self. I'll never be able to sell you, what you feel like you should be doing. I'll never tell you that, right? Why would I want to do that? I would rather do what I need to do for myself or offer you to help me build something, right? I mean, how easy is that? It's a simple relationship.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. I love that. So, what your first book? You mentioned your books. What's your first book called, and what's the second?
It deals with my own kind of journey over, the first year and a half that I left uh, work and what I went through, trying to create software to build decentralized decision making, and then um, at, I deal with the state of reality, how we all function, and the reason why, I promote what I just said, where you're providing and naturally attracting, because that's how your biofield naturally works. Everything comes from and goes back to your heart. And if you look at a picture of the biofield, it's a torus field that's just like every other magnetic field in reality. You'll see if you look at our solar system, and the Kuiper belt is the external field of that one torus field, and it all comes from and goes back to the star. So your heart is always the center of the system, and your creative circuit is here. It goes up and out, and then you naturally attract on the bottom three, which is why your abdomen, is this is your they always say about your solar plexus chakra is where you get your confidence, because that's where you're feeling the energy that's coming back to you. If you're growing more confident, if you see that you're having a positive effect on your environment, and you see that it's creating more confidence in yourself. So not only that, but that's where you process food, in your solar plexus, where you're processing your external environment. But anytime you're feeding on your external environment, it shows its indication of a block in the way you're seeing your environment as well, because this is part of your creative circuit. So this is your third eye is your part of your creative circuit just as much as your throat chakra. I'm creating, of my voice. My voice is creating energy. My third eye, and then my crown chakra and on up. That's like your creative energy, and then your receptive energy is down below. So that's why, judgments of the mind. If I'm ever judging my environment in any way, it creates a block or a negative polarity swap, where it turns what's supposed to be positive into something negative, and then blocks me from being able to provide or create for my environment as well. If I'm constantly judging the people around me, then I'm not providing for them, right? I'm pulling energetically from them, so it's actually blocking me from my higher self. Um, yeah. So by not judging anybody or anything, including yourself, it enables you to connect with your higher self a lot better, and then you can provide for your environment much more profoundly, and that constantly uh, gets more profound. As it's the same process that I just talked about, because I'm not judging somebody else as needing what I have to offer. I'm just providing. If I make a judgment on somebody wherever they're at, now I'm pulling it on them energetically, which is why uh, money does. There's no question that the money does kind of halt the process, but um, there's a way to just naturally attract what you need, because there has to be. It's a return circuit. You will attract what you need, as long as you're continuing to provide for it, and it forces you to continue to provide for it, right? Because if I could sell a service and create a bunch of monetary wealth, now I don't really have to provide for my environment anymore. Now my growth cycle has stopped. I mean, I could retire and do nothing. You know, it really is a kind of an ascension process in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and also you're when you're positive, the you're attracting, and when you're negative and repelling, and yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds really obvious and simple, but people forget that.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, and that's why most business relationships are short-term relationships, and it's unfortunate for that reason. And that's why I really enjoy being able to provide for people and uh, try and continue to provide for people, and try and create long-term relationships in my business. It doesn't matter, to me, everyone's family because everybody has these innate values, and the we just grew up in a world that lived this way. It's not our fault, you know um because if you think about the last 200 years, it was very unhealthy 250 years ago, right? The way that even the way this country was settled. We live in the United States, and the way it was settled was pretty unhealthy in a lot of ways. I mean, there were people fleeing Europe for reasons. They really wanted to come to the United States for a reason. They fled those areas. And so, even the reason that there people went to the West Coast, people fled the East Coast because of the fighting that was going on the East Coast. I mean, there's so many stories there. Even the Mormon Wars, the Church of Latter Day Saints was run out of the East Coast, and millions of them were killed, and that's why they settled in Salt Lake City. So, so many stories there about people fleeing systems that weren't helping them. Um, that same story is happening energetically now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. All over the world too. People get all angry at politicians about all the migrants coming into the United States, but it's all over. All the equatorial countries have migrant surges all over the world. It's happening. All these displaced people, and I don't think it helps to just get angry and nationalistic about it.
Yeah, there's people just wanting help. I mean, people are trying to get out of areas that they feel like they aren't helping them, that aren't supportive. So, people will naturally want to gravitate to an area that is more mutually supportive, and which is created because we have so many social healthcare systems in this country. We attract people where there isn't anything to support people. Um, yeah, I mean, Europe has a lot of, and so Europe, a lot of those countries in Europe try to protect themselves because they have very large social structures. If you look at Germany or England or any of these places where you can get paid to go to college, you're not going to make much, but that environment still supports you to do something, whereas other places don't support you, and so that they'll get an influx of immigration that they try to manage, because if they just let everybody in, then they'd have an overwhelming negative effect on their economy. So it, it is this, since every country works differently, there's those strange dynamics of immigration that um, because of underlying relationships. It all has to do with relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it complicated to do the right thing by people sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's you can't just say no to everybody, but at the same time, you have to manage it. You have to really. That's why heightening your self awareness is so important, because it becomes too easy to overextend yourself and overburden yourself by the burdens that other people carry. Uh, it's important to protect yourself and take care of yourself as much as possible. And and provide in a way where you're not getting overtaxed. So providing is a can be taxing in and of itself until you really get to where you've really mastered negative projections. You have to master people energetically feeding off of you, or judging you in any way, because that will cause you to, you'll go through mindsets where it's like, why am I thinking this way about myself? I need to relax. What's going on? I need to ground myself. So go sit in the tub for a while. Right. And so, the first book that I wrote kind of deals with a lot of that. You go through trials and tribulations, and you'll think negatively, especially if you're bringing something new that nobody else is offering. It 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 bristles the community that you're doing it for, because it threatens people that are offering something that they feel has more value, or don't, or maybe want to project something on you to make you feel like what you are doing doesn't have value to them. So, because they're not providing it, it's not something they're providing, which is why I'm so adamant about just providing what it is that you have to provide, especially if it's something new and it's something profound. And don't take anything personally. You really can't. You have to learn how to manage yourself, and don't take anything personally.
Yeah, and then you save so much time, I guess, on trying to figure out what to charge for your services and what to include and not include, and
And you will get provided for. The universe will provide. If you are providing for it, you will get provided, and things will just happen randomly. I'll be the first one to tell you things happen randomly. All of a sudden, boom! All of a sudden, something gets taken care of. It's like, oh, thank God, right? It's like, um, but it is a simple energetic circuit. As long as you're continuing to provide, you will be provided for.
right. That's awesome. I love it. People, I think people are afraid of that. They're afraid it won't work. We're such a big capitalist society now, and they think that that's some kind of hippie commune idea that you can't just charge nothing.
It sounds like a hippie commune, yeah, a hippie commune, but hippie communes are interesting to me. There's a lot of communities that have been formed in the United States. Mennonite communities that have kind of pulled themselves away from things. Very healthy communities in a lot of ways. Some aspects maybe not, but I have property in areas where they've um, created communities that are self-supporting, that are pretty healthy. They grow all their own food. They provide that for the community. And man, I'm the first one to tell you, I'm the first one to stop there, because that's better food than you're going to get just about anywhere else. Danishes, burrito. Oh yeah. It's just like, I could live here, you know? And,
Is that the same as an intentional community? Because I've been to one of those before. I thought it was really cool.
yeah, um, kind of sort of just like just a Christian community that's kind of just self-sustaining, and then connects with other communities that are similar, where they trade products. Maybe they will sell products from another community that's, in the South or on the East Coast. Yeah, yeah, very cool though. I mean, you're going to get better food from somebody that has their own cattle and milks their own cows and makes their own cheese and all that stuff. It's just like, if they're not buying anything from the commercial market and they're making everything for themselves, I mean, use your imagination. The stuff that I've had there, I mean, it tastes to me like the Danishes they make are an old European, like Danish recipe. That it's just like, man, it's like, yeah, huckleberry cheese stuffed Danishes. It's like, man, it's like so good. Yeah.
I feel like we're killing ourselves with the processed food. Just makes you dumb. I think it's terrible for your body. Not meant to have that.
Yeah, I did have a couple hot dogs last night. My boy was there.
Right.
I asked him what he wanted for dinner. Hot dog. I just want a hot dog. All right.
I know they're good.
Yeah, I mean there are better and worse hot dogs for sure, but hot dogs, generally
Mhm.
speaking, are pretty gross.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean all of us try to manage what we eat as well as we can. So I mean that's obviously what we put in will directly affect your energy levels and things.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's the most important thing for me. You know, a lot of people just want to look good, but I think the energy in your body is the most important thing for reason for eating healthy and exercising and doing all the things you know you should do. A lot of people just do it to look good, but I think your energy is really the critical factor.
Your mental health is what you're doing is you're fixing. And so if you overdo it, it's really easy to overdo it. Like, if I'm just, if all I'm doing is working out and just working on my body all the time, I'm really ignoring my mental health. There is definitely a mind, body, spirit balance there where you're doing the things for yourself to get you at the right energy level so that you can provide in the right way. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, I don't think you're ever going to see a yogi that looks like that weighs 350 pounds and is just a solid brick of muscle, right?
Right.
It's just, it's not the picture of the Tibetan monk that I have in my mind. It's
Right.
a muscle bound, brute.
Why is this yogi working out so much?
Yeah, and that's not to say that that's not. I mean, some guys just love to do that, right? Just that's their passion. So I'm not downplaying that. It's just that I think you're always ignoring some other part of yourself when you just go after one part of yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like too much of anything is unhealthy.
Yeah, too many carrots can be unhealthy.
Right.
You'll turn orange.
I like the vegetable green shakes actually. I drink those every day.
Oh yeah, yeah, those are great.
Press juice press. I have one of those.
Nice. Yeah, it keeps your gut health in really good shape. Yeah, eating meat all day long. I mean, there's a lot of people that live by that, but your gut health isn't the best if all you're doing is eating meat all day long. I think I think there's a clean variety. That being said, our bodies are so amazing that if you're maintaining that, that if your energy levels are up and it feels good for you, then do it. I'm not going to be anybody. I'm not going to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't be eating because everyone knows their own body, and I think the body has. Uh, there's been a lot of interesting studies. Joe Dispenza is one of the leading guys for this. Meditation practices and how you actually can create chemicals in the body that weren't there previously just through meditation exercises. That questions the whole medical industry when you start finding things like that, where it's like, well, if I'm creating the right meditation exercises for myself where I can create chemicals in the body, it really doesn't matter what I eat. It has more to do with my state of mind and my state of being as to how my body is going to work and my energetic level and how I can communicate, how well I connect with other people. All those things uh, really have to do with your overall sense of being. And amazingly enough, what we eat has less to do with that than we think, I think. Yeah.
So what does your day look like then? If you do you have a regular meditation and exercise schedule that you?
Yeah. I do 4 sets of exercises, probably 4 or 5 times a week, but then I do morning yoga and meditate every morning. So, first thing in the morning, a lot of times I might not do yoga right away. I've already done yoga this morning, and it's a pretty simple yoga routine. It's not complex. It's not like I'm bending over backwards and doing backflips in my living room or anything. I'm just getting myself in a state of just a calm mental state and moving energy in the body. That's why yoga is so great because you're making sure that you're staying limber because your physical body, if it starts to get bound up, it's usually an indication of an energy block in the body. So, um, in order to become a better conductor to provide for your environment, you really have to take care of this vessel because it's just a conductor that's just conducting energy and information. Um, so that's my primary thing in the morning is that some type of a lot of times and it could be as simple as laying in bed for an extra 45 minutes after you wake up and just monitoring the thoughts going through your head. If I just popped up right when I woke up, just pow, if I just came rising out of bed, rocking out of bed, and just started kind of going after it, I'm not paying attention to, because a lot of times, we'll dream and our energetic field expands when we sleep. We're like a pump. You have daily cycles just like you have a heart cycle. So your field expands and contracts. My field is contracting right now. I'm expending energy and information to, an audience, whoever's listening. And so um, I am, uh, yeah. So in my resting cycles, I'm pulling in information and energy. And so it's nice to examine what went on there before I start expending my energy, if that makes sense. And then creating an intent for the day from whatever I receive, because you're going to receive something overnight, always. And it's going to be something potentially new from the day previous. I think morning meditation exercises are something that everybody should adopt in some way. It doesn't have to be anything specific. It doesn't have to, you could look up any kind of meditation if you're not aware of it, but just simple transcendental meditation is just you monitoring what's going on through your head and trying to understand where you're kind of being led or heading in a direction. I've had dreams where just like, wow. And I realized it was telling me something that I needed to convey, that day. So without doing that, if I would have just ignored it, then I'd be ignoring, parts of me that probably need to, got information that maybe somebody needed to hear for that day.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good thought. I like that, to take that time like that in the morning when you first wake up. I should be doing more of that. Um, it's Your dreams are really important. I think
Yeah.
you can remember
Sometimes,
more of them if you want to.
yeah, sometimes they're pretty abstract.
Yeah,
Right. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. Sure,
yeah.
it can be your brain's way of recovering too, is having to create all these images.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Sometimes it can be traumatic. I've had such a wide spectrum. I mean, I can, from the beauty to the horror. I mean, you name it. I see a broad spectrum, and each one, I don't have nightmares where I wake up screaming or anything like that. But I will have dreams where it's just like, wow, that was dark. Why? And so I'll examine it. It's like, okay, why did that dream happen? Was it a projected energy from somebody else? Was it a something that uh, relates to something that's going on in my environment at all? You think about those things and just monitor it and think about how it could potentially maybe teach you a lesson in some way, or maybe it's something to convey to somebody to help them in some way. Yeah.
What I don't know. I mean, what kinds of things? I guess in your counseling experience here, your healing experience, do you help people with all these things, or do you like to focus on organizations?
I intuitively just help people with whatever. I mean, it just depends on who I'm dealing with or who I'm talking to. It's all intuition. I'm not gonna. I don't have any preconceived notion of what somebody needs, and so because connecting with your higher self is connecting with that person's higher self. So hopefully you're giving them a message that they need to hear, that they're trying to, that maybe they haven't been able to hear for themselves because they're just disconnected with themselves in some way. Because we're all higher. I mean, everyone's higher self is the same. We all come from the same source. If you really examine this universe, so we're connecting with ourselves more profoundly. We're always embodying more of ourselves. And if you look at the history of evolution, evolution makes a lot more sense when you look at it that way, because every new creature was just able to move more energy and information than the last one. So it's like it's this continuing evolutionary cycle where you're constantly moving more energy and information for your environment, or just becoming more of you, right? If you're all coming from the same place, you're just becoming a better and more profound version of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Maybe that's why growth works so well. Be focused on growth.
Yeah, personal development is really everything because you're just capturing more of yourself. You start, and spiritual teachers have taught this for years. Eventually, you kind of lose self, the self identity of the small self, and you just completely just identify with the larger self, which is everything. And so you're always talking to yourself, right? I mean, basically everyone is anyway, but it's like, we're all talking to ourselves when we're talking to each other, but a lot of times we don't even think about it that way, right?
Which is, it's really ironic that so many people start out thinking that personal development is selfish, because it really affects all the people around you in your life more than anybody else, I think, when you focus on it.
Always talking to yourself. Think of it that way. So don't ever make fun of the guy that's just walking down the street talking to the trees. He's doing the same thing you are. You're just looking at it from a different perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to support yourself first, I think.
Oh
Like
yeah.
people are hard on themselves all the time.
Yeah. Take care of yourself. Make yourself feel good. Whatever it takes. Whatever you got to do to make yourself feel good, do that.
Hmm.
You know.
Hmm. Yeah, I like making time for joy too. You can even put joy on your calendar, and people
Right.
are
Yeah.
like, "Why would you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, how do you expect to be happy if you don't have time for it?"
Exactly. Just sit there, and it's like if you're in a bad mood, it's like, why am I in a bad mood? Why can't I be happy? What am I concentrating on that would make me feel bad? Right.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get lost in your thoughts and forget that all that stuff is in your mind. However you want to feel, you can feel however you want to feel about the world around you.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Well, it
So
looks like we're getting close to an hour here, 55 minutes. We've been talking for a while. Yeah, we covered a lot of subjects though.
yeah, 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 I think so. Yeah, great
Yeah,
talk.
I mean, it all comes from personal development. So, like at the beginning of this conversation, when we started talking about business structure, and that's how I
Mhm.
advertised. Um, and to be perfectly honest, and I thought about this, I'll probably change the way I present myself on LinkedIn. I was thinking about changing my
Mm,
profile because,
okay.
um, and people deal with internal development a lot, but I need to deal with both, and so I need to word it
Mm,
because the way that we grow internally will directly affects how we are expressing ourselves to the people around us and how well we can connect with them. Um,
right.
so it's how we structure our lives, how we structure our relationships. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
it's everything.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I mean, I'll have to keep an eye on your profile now. I want to see see how it
Right.
evolves, see what you
Yeah.
come up with. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we can have another talk soon.
Yeah.
Uh,
Anytime. You
follow
know,
up, maybe.
right. I mean, I, I can cover just about anything. I just got done writing well, I'm in the middle of writing a chapter on belief for my current book, just because
Mm,
what we believe really manifests itself for everybody.
right.
And this recent movie, Dune 2, is a very powerful movie about the power of belief.
Mm,
What people believe creates their reality. And there's this weird dichotomy where am I what I'm believing creating my reality, or is are things predestined? I mean, that's a real question that you get out of that movie Dune, because the
yeah.
main character, I don't want to ruin the movie, but the main character wants to avoid his destiny at all costs because he sees
Mm,
where it's going to lead and he doesn't want to have anything to do with that. But
mm,
he ends up being forced into it, and he realizes he just doesn't have any choice. A very interesting movie in a lot of ways, but it
mm,
also deals with the psychology of belief and how beliefs create the people and the relationships around them. Yeah,
Mhm.
very good movie. I don't know if you've seen it yet or not.
Not yet. No.
Very, I would strongly recommend it. Or anybody listening to this, if you haven't seen it, think of it in those terms. And the writers did an excellent job of portraying Frank Herbert's book,
Mhm.
because Frank Herbert, in a lot of ways, was the first one to admit that it felt like he was portraying some things incorrectly. And the producer, I can't remember his name, I think it's a French producer, he understood Frank Herbert's and his intent so well. I mean, he changed a little bit of the storyline, but it felt like it was what Frank Herbert would have wanted. So that wasn't done in the first movie, the original 1984
Mm.
version. So,
Wow.
yeah, excellent movie.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out soon.
Yeah. First and
So,
second Dune. Yeah.
okay. Right. So if folks want to get a hold of you, I see your website is Circuit Breaker with a CIRK, huh?
Yeah. Because the other one, with a C, has already been taken.
Okay.
So just threw a K in there.
Circuitbreaker.com, huh?
Circuitbreaker.com. Yeah. You can also,
Great.
direct message me on LinkedIn. Look at my profile, Brian Curtis, Decentralized Systems.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks, Carl. I appreciate the time. It's been a while since I've done a podcast, and so I really appreciated this. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm doing some work in some organizations coming up, so definitely like more of your advice.
Oh yeah,
So
for
we'll
sure.
have
Yeah.
to stay in touch.
Reach out anytime. I
Have
love
some more
giving.
conversations.
Yeah, and it's every situation is different too. You know, there isn't any cookie cutter solution for anybody. So I'll be the first one to say that one, because everybody's at a different place, a different
Yeah.
time, for a different reason. And so, if you just make yourself open, then usually you can provide what's ever needed. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks again, Brian. Have a great day.